Welcome back to another genre art with JB. It's been a minute, huh, guys? I'm happy to report to you on this beautiful Friday afternoon that I made a significant amount of progress with my Asimov fan art cover here. And so today I wanted to sort of get more into the weeds of my painting process, take you through as I do this piece, and also wanted to touch on my thoughts on commissions. I think this is a subject that I've seen a few other art tubers tackle, and I figured I would throw in my 2 cents. Commissions can be a sort of a touchy subject. Everybody's got very strong opinions on the subject of commissioned art. Should you just take any commission that comes your way as a new artist, or should you hold out for a better deal, as it were, right? So my whole thing is this. A little background about me. I graduated from Pratt in 2011 at the ripe old age of 30. I went to school later. I went to school at age 25 to pursue art, and I got out and I was very eager to get work doing commissions, right? I wanted to sort of get in the industry, and at the time I really was gunning for work with Marvel and DC Comics. I thought, well, I'm just going to naturally, just hit up conventions, which is beneficial. And then from there, I met, people at conventions who knew people who knew other people, and I was developing a very big Facebook network, of writers, artists, others, professionals and aspiring professionals. And, I had stars in my eyes, and I thought, well, I'd gone to all the breaking in panels, and Axel Alonso and CB Sapolsky had told me that, in order to be a comic book artist, all you need to do is make a comic, right? Which is half true. I think, not that they were being disingenuous, I think they were being totally sincere, but yes, if you want to be a comic book artist, the first step is making a comic, but the whole getting paid part, and they do admit that getting paid is difficult, but the whole getting paid part is another story altogether, right? And also, people severely underestimate, I think, how difficult it is to actually produce and finish a work of sequential art. Doing 22 pages, 22-page comic, that's a really tall order. I mean, you're going to have a lot of people that aren't going to be able to fulfill that obligation unless they're getting paid something, because, it might sound fun to just, work on a comic for free, but unless it's your own property, and unless you're good at budgeting your time, and you've already developed the sort of mental stamina to sit at the drafting table for 8-10 hours, and you have a command of anatomy and perspective to the point where you can knock out a drawing pretty much without, straining your brain all that much, it's going to be a tall order, right? You're not going to get that comic book done, most likely. And what they don't tell you is, well, some people tell you at these breaking in panels, but what they don't really emphasize is that you're going to have to do like 2 or 3 most likely failed or aborted comics before you're able to complete one comic, before you develop the sort of wherewithal and best practices that are necessary to finish a book, if you're working in some more of an avant-garde superhero style, because it's a lot of mental bandwidth. You have to get really good at perspective. You pretty much have to be able to draw stuff on command. I'm gonna, while I'm talking here, I just want to remind myself to keep painting. I'm gonna silo this chair into its own section, but before I do, silo this chair into its own section. I don't know what happened here. That's some kind of weird mark there. Let's just see what that is. You can see that red line. Some relaxing Nintendo music playing in the background, as always. But yeah, before I get stuck on the tangent here, I was talking about comics, right? And basically what is required, specifically in the discipline of sequential art. You got to put in the time. I mean, I put in, when I was at a Pratt, I was also, that's the other thing, you're not going to be making money, which is going to compound the issues you're going to have. So you're not going to be making money. You're going to be trying to get this book done. And so when you get that sort of quote unquote paying gig, even if it's like a work, even if it's like a back end deal, you're very excited. And I made a lot of mistakes when I was starting out freelancing, doing indie work. One of my biggest mistakes was taking any commission that came my way. Any sort of, no matter how sketchy, how shady, I was all about that commission life, right? Let's see. And I remember my first experience was with this indie company, Shot in the Dark Comics. You can look them up. They were offering at the time, and keep in mind, this is 2011. So even though it seems like a long time ago, it's still, you know, not that long ago, 10 years ago, whatever. They were offering at the time $15 a page. And I was so desperate, you know, I took it because I wanted to work, right? And while I did learn a lot about best practices on that job, at the end of the day, I severely underpriced myself. And there was just disorganization from the top down, because the problem was there were no stakes. No one had skin in the game, right? So like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, you know, I'm like trying to produce this book on time. And meanwhile, the guys who were supposed to be paying me are like, you know, too busy living their lives. Like they all have day jobs and whatnot, right? Because their comics aren't paying the bills. So it's like, and I'm not begrudging anybody working a day job, but the thing is, like, the comics aren't paying the bills. And like, so, you know, but meanwhile, I'm like relying on this $15 an hour page rate. So I'm like, geez, what am I gonna do here? Like these guys are just like, they're letting their own deadlines lapse. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, it's like I had to pick up the kids from the game today, so I couldn't get to, you know, the bank and put money into PayPal, so I'll just pay you tomorrow. It was stuff like that, you know, from the editor or whatever. Or, oh, hey, I had to pay the booth people. I had to pay this and that. Or we need to get investors. Once we get the investors, we'll pay you, you know. This was after I finished the book. It took forever to finish the book because of the rewrites, mind you. So I was just like in this holding pattern of like waiting for the writer and the editor to get their act together and to prioritize the book. And then I was in a holding pattern waiting to get paid, and I actually never got paid, which is not, which, you know, I actually ended up quitting. I ended up cutting my losses and just said, hey man, this isn't working. You guys are taking way too long to, like, you're not taking this thing seriously. This is bogus. I need to get paid. And like, I was just like, yeah, no, this isn't cool. And, you know, they were just like, what do you mean? You know, like, you know, you're not reliable. Like, what do you mean you don't want to do the work? And I'm like, I got to make money. I'm 31 years old. And like, like, come on. Or not even, like, yeah, no, I was like 29 or 30 at the time. And I was just like, you know, I thought this was, I'm approaching this like it's a job, right? And you guys are approaching this like it's some kind of like hobby. And that's the problem. That's the crux of it. A lot of indie authors, right? And I don't begrudge them for pursuing their dream, but the problem with like doing any sort of indie commission that comes your way is you got to know right away these people are not going to have as much skin in the game as you as the artist, because the reality is, as an artist, it takes way longer for you to draw this stuff than it does for someone to write up page of dialogue, right? And most of the time, not even that great dialogue. It's like cobbled together and like crudely written dialogue. And that's just it, right? Like you're gonna be slaving away on this, and they're gonna be, it'll take them maybe a day or at most to write out something, and then they're gonna go on with their lives, and they're gonna expect you to be the consummate professional and knock the stuff out. It's just like the juice has to be worth the squeeze, right? So that's how I see it. You gotta, like, it has to be worth your while, especially as you get older, right? You got bills eating at you, you got student loans eating at you. If you live in the US, that is. If you're unfortunate enough to have to deal with that whole situation, shouldn't be a situation at all, but we'll see. We'll see if that changes, right? At some point. Be that as it may, you've got bills, right? You got to pay your bills. You know, I actually, I bounced around from indie job to indie job for a while. I was just living hand to mouth for 3 or 4 years, and you know, slowly built up a client base. moonlit as a graphic designer, and sort of got by doing that, kept honing my skills. I had some friends at Marvel in DC who I went to school with who were really good friends, and actually one of them is going to be in my wedding party. And you know, I got a lot better just from, you know, Skyping with my one friend who worked for DC at the time. At the time, he actually worked for Aspen, and then he ended up working for DC Comics for 5 years. But I got really competent with anatomy and perspective just from sending him stuff and having him correct my stuff and send it back. And then I got to a point, you know, from between him and going to editors and getting ripped apart at cons, and just like being able to, like, you know, develop the skill of listening to a critique objectively and figuring out what the kernel of truth of what they were saying was. Because that's the other thing, is when you go to a con, and you should be going to cons, I think cons is actually a good way to get work. And at the end of the video, I'll outline like what you should be doing in terms of where you should be trying to gun for commissions and how you should go about it. If you're going to do commissions, like what should your sort of benchmark be for taking on a commission, and you know, all that good stuff, right? It's a lot of ground to cover, so I'm just trying to keep my thoughts organized as I paint this, because, you know, spending a lot of frontal lobe energy trying to figure out what's going on here. And it looks like I have everything that I need. Let me just zoom out. View. Let's do fit on screen. And what I was saying is, when you're at a con, and your purpose at cons shouldn't be to just like walk away with a job immediately. It should be to especially your first couple of years going to comic conventions. It should be to meet editors, art directors, network, make a good impression, be professional even if the people around you are not, and then be likable, personable, and develop a network, make authentic connections, and get feedback and improve your work. That should be your goal, to improve your work, to gain knowledge, and apply that knowledge. And then the editors that you do develop a friendship, or not even, it won't be a friendship at first, but a authentic relationship with, you know, keep going back to them when you see them at the next subsequent Comic-Con, and show them how you've improved, and show them tangible, you know, progress. And that will make a good impression. And do that with writers as well. You know, stay in touch with writers. They might not give you work right away, but they will give you work eventually. I worked on a series called Dream Reavers. I was friends with a writer who, well, acquaintances, but we were very friendly at one point. We lost touch. You know, life takes you in different directions. But there was a point where I was collaborating with this gentleman quite a bit, and I met him at a con. His name was Raphael. I met him. I think it was NYCC 2012, and we kept in touch in 2016. He actually gave me work on Dream Reavers, which was a series that had been published by Ape Entertainment. But that work that developed, that came about for me in 2016, developed through a connection that I've been fostering since 2012, right? I met a few other really good people that I did commissions for, and you know, I got a fair bit of work that way. I had more positive experiences going directly to cons and soliciting work from people than I did ever on Facebook or Craigslist. I would not use Craigslist, would not use Facebook to get work. You're going to get too many yahoos on those sites, people who are just dishonest, don't know what they're doing. I will tell you a story for another video about the time I almost got sued by an entertainment lawyer. I'll leave out the names of the parties involved just to protect myself, but that's a conversation for another video. Those the dog, we have actually dog sitting, my friend's dog, so if you hear scuffling around, that is me trying to ignore the dog that we're watching. He's a cute dog, but he's a little rambunctious, right? Let's see here. I think want to get rid of that Death Star. There we go. I'm having some tracking issues with my mouse. I think Zoom definitely slows down the computer. Doing is I am just nailing down the shape of this throne that the mule is on. You can see what I'm doing is I'm going to just make a little section here to try and carve out a heroine's chair. I'm going to be using the mixer brush to sort of composite these elements together. But for now, what I want to do is just kind of get in there and get this chair going. Save my progress, just in case we get the pinwheel of death. Rather like that. Let's switch it back up. Go to image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. I always invert my image when I'm doing a digital painting. But getting back to commissions, yeah. So conventions is a good way to, nail down commissions, network, et cetera, et cetera. Ways you don't want to get work is Craigslist, Facebook. I had one good experience at Craigslist, though, that was the exception to the rule. It ended up turning into a seasonal job at a holiday art studio doing Halloween art, where they fly me around the country, and I'd produce art for various pumpkin shows around the country, and sort of like the pumpkin art you would see on Food Network. So I'm sculpting and drawing on huge pumpkins. So that actually was something really good that came out of Craigslist. So I wouldn't, maybe don't 100% dismiss Craigslist, but be very skeptical when you're on Craigslist. I would avoid Fiverr and Upwork just because they're going to lowball the heck out of you, right? Any site that's like their calling card is like, hey, we start at $5 for commissions. It's just like a bad idea to kind of get on that train. you want to be pricing yourself accordingly, right? Don't underprice yourself, because if you underprice yourself, you're going to do what I had to do with that company, Shot in the Dark, where I had to, like, you know, step away from the job. That wasn't the only job I did that with either. You know, was very wet behind the ears, very sort of inexperienced, and I did that with a few jobs before I really got wise and learned best practices with regards to freelancing and not burning clients, right? You really want to be aware, aware of the gravity of what you're undertaking when you agree to do work for a client. You know, it needs to be understood that this client is now going to expect you to perform. So you want to make sure that the price is commensurate with the work involved before you go in, that you have, like, you know, sufficient amount of edits. I generally would do 3 rounds of edits, and I would do, you know, 6 edits per round. And then after that, any edit, no matter how large or small, is, you know, $34, depending on the scope of the project. And there's milestones. So there's the sketch phase, right? First they approve the comp, then they approve the underdrawing, right? So once they've approved, usually it's a digital comp that'll do. If I'm doing a painting like this, like, you know, whether it's traditional or in oil, I'll work up a quick comp, then they approve the underdrawing, and then they're approving the final. And at each stage I would get monies from the client. So that's sort of how I'd work, like painted commissions and whatnot. I think it's important to kind of understand and know have those expectations drill down going in, right? I think a lot of artists don't think about these things. I mean, I know it's kind of cliche to say that, because a lot of experienced art tubers on here who make their living on commissions will tell you the same thing, but it really is something you want to be aware of. And, you know, especially if you're with a registry, like I'm with an artist registry called Hire an Illustrator. So any client that I get through Hire an Illustrator, I'm going to do my best to make sure that client is, you know, being well served, because, you know, if you get a bad testimonial, it can be very deleterious to your, you know, freelancing endeavors, right? You don't want a bad testimonial. So that's just something to kind of consider as well. But yeah, conventions in conjunction with maybe Facebook for networking, but also you really want to be, again, either get an agent or be part of a registry. So I actually was doing odd jobs, doing indie work, and I've got I got a job through a friend, my friend who works for DC, or worked for DC. And he was busy on, I think, Wonder Woman at the time, and he couldn't do this job. It was a pitch for a comic that was very similar to the premise of Sword Art Online. It was called, what was the comic called? Mental Block. And it was about these people who were part of a medieval fantasy world, but it was like the Matrix. The medieval fantasy world was actually a virtual reality game, and you could get XP and level up and, you know, get new weapons and get new, you know, it was like an MMORPG, but you were in the MMORPG, and it looked like real. It felt and looked real. And turns out that this medieval MMORPG was actually a simulation that was being used to kind of like keep, you know, these inmates in a prison asleep and under control. So, you know, it turns out everybody that was part of this medieval world was actually, like, you know, hooked into these, was actually in an artificially induced coma, hooked into a virtual reality machine, right? And then if you, at the end of the comic, the first issue, it zooms out, you find out that they're all in this prison. Not the artificial fantasy world, right? The sort of Dungeons and Dragons fantasy world is just part of it's a virtual construct meant to keep these prisoners under control and docile, right? And so that was the premise, and it's about this one guy who gets wrongfully convicted, and I think he's trying to find his way out of the D&D world. Different people are in there for different things. And so I thought that was a very interesting premise, looking pretty strong so far. I think what we're going to do is we're going to go in there, and we'll start to lay in some color here. So I'm going to go to select mode. I usually will feather my objects. And I'm having some calibration issues, but that's okay. Let's look up some reference. We go to my desktop. Standard screen mode. Look up some reference. I actually really like the design of this throne from Man of Steel, so I think we're going to be using that just as like reference. Stick with me. But in any event, you want to be, you know, I did this pitch and it actually got greenlit. We submitted it to Marcoja Comics, but even Marcoja, which is supposed to be like a top 10 company, you know, in the direct market, or at the time it was, I don't know if it still is, but they didn't, you know, they greenlit our pitch, but like they wanted to give the writer a back end deal and he was already paying the colorist and I out of his own pocket and he couldn't do it. So we were just like, all right, we can't do this, and it fell through, unfortunately. But I mean, you know, I was really bummed about that. But it gave me like something that I could submit to this agency called Glasshouse Graphics, and I submitted my work to them, and they were a talent agency, and I just cold submitted my work to them, and they took me. They like agreed to take me on as an artist, and I got some work through Glasshouse Graphics for a couple of years, and then from there, you know, I was making some money, but you know, I wasn't really at that point. I was getting a little burnt out in general on the whole getting paid net 30 thing, and you know, I just wanted something more steady. And so I kind of fell into teaching. I was moonlighting, you know, doing teaching and doing comics at the same time, and started teaching more and more. And then from there, kind of got back into painting and started getting more book cover work and getting, you know, started working for the holiday art studio. So now primarily I do book covers, I do holiday art, and I teach. But you know, before I fell into the holiday art and fell into the teaching, I was doing quite a bit of work through this agency and getting work from, again, my friend who worked for DC Comics. So I would say the best ways to get work are going to conventions directly and meeting people and cultivating friendships with writers and editors, or not even friendships, but relationships, right? They could develop into friendships. And then the next way to get work is to, you know, make friends from some of those relationships, and then they'll give you work when they can't do work. And then the third way is to get an agent or become part of an artist registry, right? So right now I'm with Hire an Illustrator. The things you don't want to do, I wouldn't do, again, any of these like sort of like fly-by-night sites like Fiverr, like lowest common denominator. We don't want to pay anybody like the cost of living rate. You know, I would avoid Fiverr. I would avoid, generally, for the most part, Craigslist. I would avoid Facebook. I would avoid Upwork for sure. You know, they want, you know, they have the audacity, Upwork, to charge you for what they call connects. You can make connects for free at a Comic-Con. Although with COVID, that's kind of put a wrench into things, huh? But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, let's see. Conventions, get an agent, and develop a good network of friends that could refer you to clients. Those are the best ways to get work, and be present on social media. Have a good Instagram, have a good Facebook. A YouTube channel can't help, right? Those are all things that can help you, are hugely beneficial. So those are the ways, and long story short, that I would, you know, try to get work. I'm getting a lot of lag here, so what I'm going to do is I might cut this video a little early. We're at 2:31 right now, so we've been on for about half an hour, I think. I'll let it go a little bit longer. I calibrated my machine yesterday, but it's just like giving me all sorts of issues. So I think what I'm going to do is just like flat some colors in on the throne and cut this video. Let's see if it's opening. Nope. Yeah, it's really, I think Zoom is causing it to, there we go. I'm using my trackpad right now. It was giving me these issues yesterday. But in any event, I'm just gonna cut it now just because it's giving me major issues. It's, you can see the mouse is like shaking on me. But those are some ways I would, you know, nail down commissions, guys. I hope you found this video educational. I don't know, I didn't do too much today in terms of, you know, working on this, but I was experiencing some serious lag with my mouse. So I'll be back next week with hopefully my mouse issue resolved. Right? All right, guys, take care and have a great week, right? Until next time. Ciao.